Hi, this is Sidney from Speedlab, and today I'm going to teach you how to look at a dyno chart, read and understand it. Spend enough time on the internet and online and you'll probably come across one of these when talking about performance numbers. This is called a dyno chart, and this is the most effective and straightforward way to prove that something makes power or not when it comes to engine modifications. A dyno chart basically tells you how much power and torque your car makes. That's it. It's very simple. It does not tune, it does not add power, it does not do anything except measure the horsepower of your car. It's basically a glorified treadmill for the car. So in every dyno chart, there's always two axes. One is the x-axis, which is always the RPM of the car being measured. So in this case, it's a Montero, so it's from 2,000 to 4,300. Then the y-axis here has horsepower and torque. For the Dynapac dyno chart, they split it into two. But later, we'll review another popular dyno chart that you keep seeing, which is from Dynojet. So these lines represent the number of runs in one dyno session. For the Dynapac one, each file can contain up to 6 runs, which is represented by these 6 colors. We'll start with the horsepower side. That's what everybody keeps asking, and that's what everybody sort of understands a little bit more. The first run is this red line, which is almost always here, the baseline power, which means car comes into the shop, nothing has been done, we put it here, we take a power reading of what it is. Whether it's stock or slightly modified, it's called the baseline because we haven't done anything yet. Then subsequent runs, obviously the expected is you should get more power, which is why you're having it dyno tuned in the first place or having modifications done. And this is our second run. This is a historical one, which we already did a few weeks ago with the ECU reflash. So from here, you can see the peak power at stock is around 155, which is indicated here. This is our power after reflash, which is 181. Note that the RPM is pretty much the same, 3,400 RPM. So that's the correct way to compare power actually, or anything. It has to be on the same RPM scale. Then this is what we did just now with a full exhaust installed. So we're up to 219 horsepower for this old 2009 3.2 Montero. Torque is the same way. You read the graph here. So with diesels, it always starts off high, then goes lower. But as you can see, we have a pretty big, almost 150 foot-pound of torque increase here, from 312 to 446. That's pretty big, considering, just for reference, your average 7.8 only makes 100 foot-pounds of torque. Most people always quote when they get into these internet arguments is, oh, my car makes 100 horsepower because that's what the brochure says. You are only partly right. It's 100 horsepower at a certain RPM. Like for this Montero, when people ask how much power did you make? Oh, stock we make 155 at 3,500 RPM. This is important because if you look at the chart here at the bottom, you're only making 120 horses at 2,250 RPM. This part and this part almost nobody mentions. And here, towards the end of the RPM graph, you're actually only making 90 horsepower at red line of a diesel Montero. This is the number that everybody's most interested in, but this only tells part way of the story. Because here we have practically 155 to 218, that's about 65 horses. But at here, if we take these 2 points, it's actually closer to 60 horsepower. What you're most concerned about is the area in between the two charts that you're looking at. This one here. This is only 1 point, but you have to take the whole chart and the whole dyno as a whole. Same thing with torque. It starts off big, then gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller as you go down to red line. So next time when you want to argue with your friends, you should always ask, okay, horsepower at something RPM. It always has to have that because power by nature is defined as work over time. Torque is the work that you're doing, the amount of force that you're giving. Power is time, meaning how much force you apply over a period of time. And that period of time is from 2,000 to 4,300 RPM. And the M in the RPM is minutes. So revolutions per minute. That's your measure of time. So power always has to have a length of time and the time component in between. It cannot just be, it's not a static thing like, oh, I make this much power now. Yes, but what about a second later? What about 5 seconds later? Okay, that's for the dyno chart from Dynapac. The Dynapac is actually a brand of dynamometer. The same way that you have an Orion brand ruler, you have a Century brand ruler, and a Stanley brand ruler. Different dynos have different brands, but they all measure the same thing. It's horsepower. And then this is another type of dyno. This is from DynoJet, which is you also see a lot on the internet. And this is their dyno chart. As you can see, it's also the same. You have RPM here at the bottom. You have power here at the y-axis. But you have torque here at the other y-axis. What they do is they intersperse it with each other. Same thing also, you can have multiple runs represented by multiple colors. So this is 2 runs. First run is red, second run is blue. So this is the line for power, these two. Then this is the line for torque. Same thing also, there's a pointer here that you can put here and the values here will change. Also, maximum power at, it will show you here, 180 and 146 horsepower at this RPM here, at 6,000 RPM. Then it will show you also max torque, which is somewhere here at 5,000 RPM. So once again, you read it the same way, power at RPM, torque at RPM. And as you can see, when you're only at 2,500, you're only doing about 20 horse, then it gradually gets bigger, 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 until red line. Same thing with torque. This is a gasoline engine, so your maximum torque is made somewhere here in the middle. So some torque, some torque, some torque, big torque, then torque drops off. Now, are there other brands of dynos in the Philippines? Yes, there are. If your car comes with a printout from one of these, it is unquestioned what the numbers are. Okay, so that's how you read a dyno chart, whether it's from DynoJet or Dynapac. And if you go to the Speedlab Facebook page, I do post a lot of these things. This one, sometimes this one, because we do have a DynoJet also. And with the corresponding explanations, what these lines also mean. So yes, check it out, so you might learn a thing or two.